All right, we're gonna get started now. So welcome everyone. Thanks for coming. Welcome to Creating a Citizen-Focused Smart Cities, Bottoms Up with Shiva and Najmi. This event is hosted by San Diego Design Week, as you all know, and San Diego Experience Design Professionals Networks. We are a community of over 4,000 UX practitioners who gather regularly to connect, inspire, and learn. And we come from all over the world. It's been awesome. So my name is Antonio. I'm president. And I would like to just take a moment to acknowledge our board members and volunteers. So it takes a village to create events like this one, and we appreciate their support, and it wouldn't be possible without you guys. So thank you. And let me tell you a bit about Sdxd if this is your first time at one of our events. We have monthly events, like I said. Our presenters include a mix of local and worldwide industry leaders. We've had local speakers from companies like Qualcomm, Mitchell International, and ServiceNow. And we've also featured folks from other markets like San Francisco, Denver, and even Portugal. This year, we're pleased to have MetaLab as our annual sponsor. MetaLab is a remote-first product design agency with 3 team members in America's finest city, San Diego. And with their support, Sdxd is able to host at least one event each month. So thanks, MetaLab. It's been awesome having you guys as a sponsor. And here are a couple of our past events we've had. And if you like this event, please check us out next month. Or this month, actually, September 30th, we have an event on how to write good microcopy. It's a workshop, and it's going to be pretty awesome. So you can find it at our meetup page, and we'll put a link in the chat. And without further ado, let's get to the agenda today and the reason why you're all here. So after this, Shiva will have her awesome presentation, and throughout the presentation, feel free to write any questions you may have using the Zoom Q&A feature, or in the chat, and we'll take the questions and we'll do our best to get them in the Q&A portion of this talk. And I just want to also make a note. There's also closed captioning that Zoom offers. So if you look at your actions panel in Zoom, it's a couple of clicks, but if you see the CC, you should click. If you click that, you can activate your closed captions. And I believe some of our team members have posted instructions in the chat. And yeah, after that, we'll have an optional post-event networking. So this will allow people to allow us to connect. And if you have any follow-up questions for Shiva, she'll be there. And it was awesome opportunity to meet people. So let me introduce Shiva. Shiva has been leading user experience for almost 18 years, or for 18 years, sorry. Most recently as head of product design for the LinkedIn profile and LinkedIn search features. She's currently the director of design of Freewill and founder and executive director of Tech for Change. Shiva was also a UX design lead at Yahoo, and she's a former Code for America fellow and holds MS and BS design degrees in symbolic systems from Stanford University. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Shiva for Creating Citizen-Focused Smart Cities, Bottoms Up. And the floor is yours, Shiva.
Thanks, Antonio. And thank you to San Diego Design Week for all the inspiring talks and for having me, and to Sdxd for hosting me. I moved to San Diego last year from San Francisco, where I'd been a user experience design practitioner for 18 years. As Antonio mentioned, I'm currently heading up user experience and design at a startup called Freewill, and I'll just put it out there right away, we're hiring. At the same time, I'm a civic technologist and nonprofit founder, and those might sound like very different things, but that blend makes perfect sense to me. As designers, we're all humanists first, because the problems we're solving are about human beings, they're not about technology. Let me show you what the civic tech problem is. Wherever we live at least 2 lives with a huge discrepancy between them. Our private sector life and our public sector life. And most of the innovation happens in the private sector. Clearly, in our private sector lives, things have come a long way just in the last 10 years. We used to experience banking like this. Now, banking can happen anywhere. We're now used to services meeting us where we are. But we can see that government hasn't kept up. This is the line outside the Department of Motor Vehicles in Los Angeles. Let me share another story. In Boston, the city installed 2 public parklets, which are small public areas for people to sit and chat and sip coffee and hang out. They cost about $25,000 each, and no one ever sits there. Can you guess why they failed? Well, I look at these benches and they don't look very comfortable to sit on. They're curved in shape and they're right adjacent to street traffic. You can't really sit on that and have a conversation with someone. A different story from Florida. At the end of 2013, the state of Florida rolled out a new unemployment website. So all Floridians who wanted to sign up for unemployment benefits had to go through this website. They could no longer call or go to an office. The website launched, and a few months later, the state of Florida was very excited to see that the unemployment rate was falling dramatically. After a while, they tried to figure out what was going on, and they eventually figured out that the website that people were forced to use to sign up wasn't working. Now, these are thousands of Floridians who depend on those few $100s a week to feed their kids, and there was no one that they could pick up the phone to call and tell that they weren't receiving their benefits. This website cost the state of Florida $77 million. And finally, let me share a story from right here at home. In December 2016, the city of San Diego approved a plan to install smart LED streetlights that were energy efficient and cost saving. This was billed as the world's largest smart city platform because these streetlights were powered by thousands of cutting-edge data gathering sensors that could track movements of cars and people, and even air quality, so that city leaders could gain a deeper picture of parking and traffic, and innovative apps could be developed. The total cost of the project was $30 million. But what many people didn't know is that the 3,200 smart streetlights installed thus far were also equipped with cameras and microphones. For the public, that came as a surprise, as did the revelation that police had access to the footage. In 2018, San Diego police had stumbled upon the camera data, and since then regularly began accessing video footage from the streetlights to help solve crimes, including murders, accidents, and civil unrest and vandalism during protests. 2 years ago, people realized that there were cameras in the streetlights. Controversy erupted because now, rather than being smart bulbs in smart cities, these were surveillance bulbs in surveillance cities. Activists voiced fears of privacy and civil rights abuses and inequitable policing, and they wanted the cameras off until the city established methods and rules for privacy, transparency, and oversight of this data. 30 local groups came together to advocate for more than a year for these oversight rules. Ultimately, the city ordered the turning off of all the sensors and cameras until the city leadership could craft ordinances governing the use of such surveillance technology. That's $10 million of taxpayer money that could have been saved with much better planning and advanced collaborations with community organizations. But it turned out that the city staff couldn't actually turn off the cameras because the cameras share the same power supply as the lights themselves. The cameras can't be turned off without plunging the city into literal darkness. So in lieu of disabling the cameras, the vendor just simply cut off the city's access to the data. Cities often jump to smart city solutions, and there are many, many stories like these all around the world. These things are ridiculous and painful for people, and they damage trust of government. But why do projects, particularly large projects, fail in practice? Projects fail when you build without understanding the full context of needs and usage. When the solutions are designed without sufficient input from the stakeholders whose engagement is most critical in the long term, and when they're created without first testing them out. If you like to think in terms of equations, good intentions with the wrong mindset leads to bad design. So how can public projects get it right? You have to lead with people, not problems. So how do you do that? Well, let me share a story from my own experience of what that looks like. Nearly 10 years ago, I took a year off to do Code for America's full-time fellowship program, which we call the Peace Corps for Geeks. At Code for America, we believe that leading with a focus on the people can also work for government. It has to come from the bottom up. That means it's going to take all of us bringing all of our skills to the table to make it work. We have access to a way of thinking and technical skills and design skills that are not generally present in government. Code for America's theory of change is that both sides need to be involved. You need active citizens and you need active government to be engaged in finding new ways to work with citizens. Let me show you what that can look like. I was partnered with the City and County of Honolulu along with 2 other fellows. And when we started the year, we did about 50 needs finding interviews with all the government departments and with community organizations. And one of the things we learned was that it was very hard for citizens to get access to city information. How many of you have ever been to a government website? Like with most government websites, people were frustrated because they couldn't make sense of the information on the city's website because it was just pages and pages of obscure legalese. Now, the city's website was a massive thing of 30,000 pages. It wasn't going to be possible for us to re-architect and create better content for the entire website in the few months that we had. So instead, we decided to create a parallel site that better conformed to how citizens actually want to get information from a city website. We conducted user research with actual citizens, and we designed and built Honolulu Answers, which is a simple interface anchored around search, where you enter a question like, how do I renew my driver's license? And you get back easy, clear, simple answers that drive you towards an action. It tells you where you need to go, what you need to bring, what you need to do, boom. We had seen that this is what citizens are looking for. Now, the site itself was easy enough to build, but we were faced with the challenge of how to populate all of the other answers. It would have taken the 3 of us a very long time. So we did something that's really radical when you think about how government is used to working. We asked citizens to write the content. We thought if it's supposed to be a citizen-focused website, then why not actually involve citizens in co-creating it? We held a write-a-thon where we invited the public to come together for a few hours. And in one Saturday morning, we were able to populate all of the content for most of the frequently asked questions. But more importantly than that, we created a new way for citizens to participate in their government that was inclusive. People came from all ages, many of them older, writers, geeks, a blind resident came, and they researched and answered questions. We attributed the answers to the citizens who wrote them, which is sort of the equivalent to having a bench named after you. People felt so engaged, they were asking us for more questions to take home for homework. It's hard to articulate the sense of empowerment and responsibility that citizens felt for their city based simply on this small act of participation. In addition to that, there were 15 city employees who came on their own time on the weekend, including the mayor, all dressed up. So not only were we seeing citizen engagement, but since the city employees had to explain things to people in plain language, from citizens' perspective, you could see their mindset shifting. We were witnessing government being more open and collaborative. Now, this was a pretty cool story in and of itself, but it got even better. On the National Day of Civic Hacking the following year, the Code for America Fellowship team in Oakland took the free open source code base of Honolulu Answers and turned it into Oakland Answers. And again held a write-a-thon where they took the most frequently asked questions and invited citizens to write the answers to them. And again, we heard about the empowerment and responsibility that people felt for their city. Compared to what you might think of when you hear the term smart cities, this is an example of people making their cities smarter instead of sensors. We use the term civic hacking, which is the act of fixing civic problems. Since it's open source, Honolulu Answers has now been redeployed in over a dozen cities around the world, along with the write-a-thon. And by piecing together these small acts of participation that we're enabling through civic hacking, we can slowly re-energize citizenship and restore trust in government in a new 21st century way. This is a story about how a user-centered design process that is participatory and community-driven can start to change the relationship between government and citizens, or more broadly, between creators and users. It's twofold. What we've seen is that in order to bridge the gap between creators and users, or government and citizens, We need to focus on user needs to create solutions in a human-centered way. And we need to facilitate and co-create with community members who are often trying to find creative ways to address their problems. In the user experience world, we call this human-centered design and community-driven design. The challenging part is usually never the technology. Today, we have the technology to do pretty much anything. Technically, we could solve climate change. But why is it so difficult to do? It's not for technical reasons. It's because people, who are the ones that technology is serving, are complex. And cities are not like carefully controlled laboratories. Cities are messy spaces that are hard to measure or manage, and they can't really be controlled. They're where we live and breathe and fall in love and give birth and dance and drive on the roads and get into accidents and put out our garbage for collection. There are ways to improve the human experience of cities, and technology can both help and hinder that. So it has to be leveraged strategically. What do I mean by that? To quote our friends at Sidewalk Labs, over the past 200 years, there have been 3 technological revolutions that have defined the modern city. First, the steam revolution gave cities rapid transportation, steamships, and large factories that transformed commerce. But it also gave cities the first industrialized slums and the worst air pollution that humankind had ever known. Second, the electricity revolution gave us lights and subways and elevators. But electricity also allowed us to block sunlight and retreat to artificial environments and pack people vertically into high-rises. Third, the automobile revolution allowed the city to expand in every direction, providing access to more jobs and travel. But it also gave us sprawl and traffic jams and pollution. And cities started to be designed for cars, not for people. Each of these revolutions has provided huge benefits, but also profound social costs. We're now at the start of a fourth. A new set of digital technologies, ubiquitous connectivity, real-time sensors, precise location services, these can collectively transform city life. But we have to be conscious of how we do it. Will these things make the city more responsive, equitable, innovative, and human? Or will they challenge civil liberties and privacy and public spaces and reduce trust? Just like we believe government can work, we believe digital technologies have the potential to solve today's urban problems in ways that cater to people's needs. That's where smart cities come in. Smart cities are a lot more than the use of sensors and data. Their smartness involves people and process. We call it civic technology. 9 years ago, I attended a talk at the Code for America Summit that left a deep impression on me. It was by Anthony Townsend, who was a director at the Institute for the Future. He showed images of holographic displays from the governments of Shanghai and Rio, a very top-down approach. This photo is from Cisco unveiling its Cisco Pavilion at the Shanghai 2010 Expo. It's this vision of a holographic display that allows city managers to move pieces around, deciding the fate of the city and of citizens on their own, kind of like the gods of ancient Greece. And it's not just Cisco, it's IBM, Accenture, General Electric, and industry thinking that they can take the same systems they develop for global corporations and port them over to government. But government doesn't work like business. And citizens are not employees or customers. They're free-spirited beings that can screw all of your plans. So what's the problem here? The problem here is that there's no involvement of citizens in these top-down approaches. Our definition of civic technology means you include everyone in the process. You have to bring inclusive communities. You have to bring those people to the table who will be most affected by these tools. The advantage to a top-down approach, of course, is efficiency. But cities are not about efficiency. They're about culture and commerce and community and pleasure. And the city itself is a higher order of human existence. None of these are efficient things. Cities are messy and complicated. Sir Patrick Geddes, who's sort of the intellectual father of how to build cities from the bottom up, said this beautifully in the late 1800s, early 1900s. A city is more than a place in space. It is a drama in time. You can't install a smart city from the top down and expect people to live with it, especially if it takes power away from them. You have to engage them to build from the bottom up. So what does a good example of people-centered civic design look like? Remember the Boston Parklets I talked about earlier? Well, contrast the Boston Parklets with San Francisco's. Credited as introducing the first public parklet, the city of San Francisco has put up parklets all over with huge success. So what was the difference between San Francisco's parklets and Boston's? In San Francisco, they've been doing a couple of key things. One, they've been involving the neighbors and local business owners as key participants in the process. And two, they're prototyping using temporary parts to create low-cost solutions that can be adapted based on user feedback. When you prototype ideas and test them, it doesn't take much time or resources. In fact, there's an annual grassroots event called Parking Day that's now global, where people just put in coins to take over a metered spot and test a parklet design or location. The picture on the left is from the very first Parking Day that was held in San Francisco in 2005 by an organization called Rebar. They literally just put in coins and took over a metered parking spot for 2 hours. And it was enough for them to test and learn a lot. I bet that in Boston, if locals had helped choose the locations and set up their own spaces, they could have created successful temporary parklets for a fraction of the time and cost. Leaving the end users out of the process sets us up for failure. Let me share another example, this time with sensors. The Air Quality Egg is a do-it-yourself sensor network developed by Public Laboratory. It started as a Kickstarter campaign and is building an incredible network of air quality monitoring stations using simple open source hardware technology. They've created a cheap ozone sensor that people can stick out their windows to measure the air quality in their immediate environment. And that information is shared online in real time. It's just a community developed open source project that's driven by people who care about the air they breathe. And it's thousands of inventors like this all over the world. Instead of top-down efficiency, they're creating grassroots solutions for fellow residents, building cities from the bottom up by focusing on the needs of people. I shared this example to show that the issue isn't with sensors. To be clear, while technology can empower civic hacking, it's not about the technology. Peter Rees, who was the city planning officer for the City of London Corporation, was asked to define what a smart building is, and he had a great reply. You can put all the technology you like into a building, but if it remains empty, it is not intelligent. Instead, your smart civic solution might be something really simple, like this SMS application called Balance. In 2013, a Code for America fellowship team worked with the Human Services Agency in San Francisco. They learned that if you're on food stamp benefits, you get an EBT card that's like an ATM card. It's not easy to check your balance on this card. There's no online banking for it. The only way to check your balance, other than crossing your fingers when you try to pay for groceries and hoping you have enough on the card, is that you have to go to one of the contracted ATMs to look up your balance. Every time you look up your balance at the ATM, the bank charges you 75 cents. In California, in 2014, banks made $20 million, 75 cents at a time. So of course, this is ridiculous and painful for people and damages trust of government. Code for America's health team created a simple product called Balance, where you sign up, text your account number, and you get your balance, and it's free. Since it's open source, it's been redeployed in many other states by volunteer citizen technologists. This grassroots citizen side of civic technology can involve apps and do-it-yourself sensor networks, but the key is that it starts with the question of what people need, not with the answer. And that's just what we do as designers, right? So how is it different to design for cities and government? For one, the users are citizens. You have to design for everyone, for a big, diverse set of needs and interests and points of view. In the private sector, if a user doesn't like a company, they don't have to be a customer. They can go to a competitor. With public services, a resident can't just stop being a citizen. As a designer, you have to worry about whether poor people can afford the solution, and you have to worry about whether or not the solution has any unintended consequences. Second, the products are public services that people depend on. So the tolerance for failure is really low. Compared to not getting your online shopping on time, if the fire engine doesn't show up, your life is at stake. Part of government's job is dealing with problems that nobody else wants to deal with. It's hard and it's messy. What this also means is that as designers, we need to plan for graceful failure. After the Fukushima meltdown in Japan or the Boston bombings, we saw that dependence on the cellular networks can halt a city. When city lights run over these networks, if there's a tsunami and the cell towers are down, you have a few hours before it's lights out. You've got to have backups. This is a photo of a New York City subway station kiosk. What would be more useful and smarter than a blue screen of death is to offer some backup paper maps and schedules. We have to be very cognizant as technologists and designers to not rely solely on technology, which creates a single point of failure. Fourth, launch day is very different. The software industry is iterative and agile. When Facebook launched, it didn't have policies regulating hate speech or nudity in photos on its first day. It just launched a minimum viable product and iterated from there. But government has to abide by a lot of regulations on day one. Fifth, standards are laws. If you don't follow the Americans with Disabilities Act guidelines, you break the law, not just a design best practice. And what's at stake is really high: improving and saving lives, making and saving public dollars, the perception of government as effective and innovative versus inefficient and bureaucratic, which fundamentally affects our trust of government. Political legacies. For example, in 2013, we saw that President Obama's entire legacy was on the line due to a non-functional website, healthcare.gov. But the way civic design is done is the same. It's about designers understanding people's needs and situations. It's about being open to prototyping, trying new ideas, throwing them out and learning from them, rather than getting hung up on first building a complete strategic plan. And it should also include user-led design, which is a much more empowering process facilitated by designers, which enables and builds on the strategies that the community already has. This process applies as much to building for public needs as it does to creating digital consumer apps. So this leads me to you. How can you be involved? Well, I used the term civic hacking earlier, which is the act of fixing civic problems. It's the idea that if you see a problem, you work to fix it and not just complain about it. It's just as much about contributing code to an open source civic app as it is about designing street facilities or creating a workshop that you conduct with city officials to discuss how to improve a neighborhood. Here's Tamara Shopson, a Code for America fellow from 2012, painting a bike logo on these bike storage lockers in Santa Cruz because no one could tell what those things were for. That's a civic hack. So whether we're researchers, designers, writers, artists, community organizers, all of us can be civic hackers. You could talk to your neighbors and think together, what is missing from our neighborhood or city? Maybe there's an intersection that is dangerous for pedestrians and needs traffic calming. Maybe you'd like to see more community gardens, composting, dignity for the homeless, or more murals. Perhaps your neighborhood just needs more space to sit and relax. Earlier, I talked about reclaiming street parking spaces for more than car storage. We've seen from all the temporary parklets set up during the pandemic that people enjoy them. They have an economic impact and they're bringing vitality to our streets and communities. Every year on the third Friday of September, there are global parking day events all over the world, including here in San Diego. Parking Day is open to all, and the goal is for us to reimagine the possibilities for the way our streets are used. This annual Parking Day is coming up next Friday, September 17th. Check out the parklet prototypes on 3rd Avenue in Chula Vista, or whichever neighborhood you're in, put some coins in a meter, run an inexpensive experiment, and take ownership of your neighborhood, one parking space or block at a time. Bring your friends, it'll cost you $2. Or on Saturday, September 18th, you can join Open San Diego, which is a Code for America brigade, a volunteer group of civic technologists that meets every week. They will be hosting an online event to join Code for America's National Day of Civic Hacking. In fact, there are volunteer community groups in 140 cities around the world. This civic tech movement is international, and it includes a nonprofit I started 8 years ago, Code for Pakistan, under Tech for Change. This global civic tech movement is like a family, everyone working to make our communities better. As citizens, we're not just passive consumers, we can participate in making government work. As Jane Jacobs, who was an urbanist and activist, once said, cities have the capability of providing something for everybody only because and only when they are created by everybody. That means all of us. You have your own unique superpower. Use it for the greater good. So thank you all for leading with people, and thank you for listening. And with that, I'll turn it over to Antonio so we can take your questions.
That was awesome. I'm already excited and I don't know, I was smiling through the whole presentation. That's awesome.
Questions.
Yeah, I need to think about what my superpower is.
You have one. Everybody.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get to the Q&A. I think we have a couple of awesome questions here in the chat. So I guess, yeah, we can get started with directly on how to act and how everybody has superpowers. So Nick asks, where might I look to start getting involved civically in San Diego?
Thank you for the question. I actually happen to have a slide just for this. So here are some local organizations and upcoming events that you might want to consider getting involved with. I'm not affiliated with any of them, but I've heard good things about all of them. So I mentioned Parking Day next Friday. I'll be going to that. National Day of Civic Hacking is next Saturday. And Open San Diego, which is a Code for America Brigade volunteer group, they have ongoing weekly meetups every Tuesday. And right now, I believe they're online. Design for San Diego, D4SD, has frequent community design workshops and an annual civic design challenge where they facilitate people to use design thinking to address difficult civic problems in San Diego. Scale SD empowers people to design cities they want to live in. It's a nonprofit sitting at the hub of private industry, public organizations, academia, and the city of San Diego. So these are just some civic groups that I know of, and there's several others, but you can also do so many things on your own.
Great. No, these are some awesome resources. And yeah, everybody check them out. If you're interested, it's a great way of getting involved. Okay, so let's go to the next question. Jessica asks, with the Honolulu Answers project, who was responsible for maintaining the site ongoing and making sure that the answers were correct?
Yeah, great. That's a good question, because when you start to get into the nitty-gritty of things, so the fellowship year lasted, it was a total fellowship was about a year long. And once we created the prototype of this minimum viable product, and essentially a lot of it was myself, I created a content style guide that showed the kind of language we wanted on Honolulu Answers, because that was such a key part of it. It was just sort of like you answer in bullet points and you say, here's where you need to go, here's what you need to do. Did not want pages and pages of obscure stuff. So I created a content style guide. It's open source, it's online. And then I trained the city's public information officers. Essentially, the questions that people wrote up in the write-a-thon, we took them and I gave them to the PIOs, the public information officers, as homework to get them into the right style and the style guide. And then I had, I think, like 7 rounds of these workshops, and some of the public information officers were made moderators of the Honolulu Answers website. They were made admins, and we taught them how to approve answers, review them, approve them, and things like that. So it was really the city government officials who could take that on. At the same time, Honolulu had a Code for America brigade that also we set up that year. And brigades are just these community volunteer groups that Code for America has. So we also brought into the loop, and actually throughout the process, the head of the Honolulu brigade was involved and had built a relationship with government and was also an admin on Honolulu Answers. So we made sure that we had both sides there. and also continuing to engage the community ongoing. It's an open source application, so we could continue to submit pull requests to it, but ultimately we had the city maintain it. And then, as happens with a lot of city projects, Honolulu Answers eventually was the city administration changed, and they didn't keep it up. We then kept hosting it, but I think what it served, its purpose really was more to show what's possible. Like it was redeployed, sort of went viral in this way together with the write-a-thon model. And I think that the main purpose that Honolulu Answers really serves in retrospect now is to just sort of show what happens when you bring the community in and what's possible.
Nice. Yeah, it's awesome to see how, I mean, by making it open source and just like a very, I don't know how to, like in a good way, it's like a very practical way, and the way that people can just copy it and instantly learn from Honolulu and then learn from other cities that have done it. It's kind of like a nice chain effect.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. And now I want to look it up on GitHub, see if I can find it.
I can send you the GitHub link. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we have a question from Andrew. So Andrew says, are there ways to ensure that participatory designs are not biased towards only citizens that have time and resources to participate in workshops?
Yes, so thank you for the question, Andrew. The onus, I think, is on us as designers and as researchers to really ensure that we are being inclusive, right? So we're looking at who will be most impacted by, who is most impacted by this, or who has this need, who is most impacted by this problem. And then you have to make sure that you're getting people from those communities and those groups who will be most impacted by that problem to be at the table. And that requires us going into their neighborhoods, not just sort of hosting something and expecting and waiting for them to come. And so, yeah, I would just say the ways are for us to be really cognizant about it and think about it, and then make sure that we are doing what we need to do to get that engagement.
Awesome. Let's see. Okay, we have another question from Norman. So he says, curious if Code for America or your other organizations were ever threatened legally or otherwise by contractors or lobbyists that get paid to maintain the legacy system that your solutions replaced.
Sorry, say that again, Antonio. I'm not sure I caught the question fully.
So it says, okay, so he's curious if Code for America or other organizations you worked on were threatened legally or otherwise by contractors or lobbyists that get paid to maintain the legacy systems that your solutions replace. So
that's a fun question. No, I don't think we were ever threatened or sued or anything like that. What we're doing is open source, right? And so anybody can contribute to, in fact, the hope is that the community will actually contribute to these things and will be responsible. Like when it's open source, people can maintain it. Now, I will tell you something that the whole notion of vendors. So in the United States, there's a statistic that is like something like 94% of large government IT projects that cost over $10 million are either broken or don't work or are delivered late or over budget. And most of the time simply just don't work. And they take years and years to build. And so we also really believe that that's not the way to create solutions, right? Generally what happens is you have a full strategic plan and these vendors will come up with these giant MIS solutions or what have you. But what we do in design thinking and what we do as agile technologists is that we iterate, right? Like we make the next thing that makes sense. And we can't actually even guarantee you what the solution is going to be, but what we can guarantee you is that the solution we come up with will be the best solution to the problem you asked, right? Or the problem that we're trying to solve, the needs that we found. It's a matter of prototyping and iterating and testing and moving forward from that. So the story that I was just quickly going to share is that Code for America and 18F, which is a federal agency that follows very similar sort of practices, digital services design, user-centered design, and those kinds of things. They got together and collaborated because the state of California was putting out a child welfare services system. And, in order to avoid creating this giant request for proposals that government puts out, they created for the first time a modular RFP, request for proposals, which broke things down into smaller portions so that you build, they put out to bid the first piece of it, which is, the first agile portion of it that might last 3 months. And then the next vendor bids on it. And then the next vendor bids on it. And, so that if something doesn't work, you can sort of course correct easily. They didn't get sued either. So I don't think that this is necessarily, I don't think that that's an issue. I mean, yeah, there would be no grounds to sue. What we're doing is saving the government tons of money in efficiency and creating solutions that are better and that actually meet the needs that they set out with and that citizens set out with.
Yeah, so it almost seems like it's more of a, like there's this kind of hole or that this solution is kind of that's solving for, right? And it's so efficient, like you're saying, it's saving so much money that it's like I don't know if there's anything to sue, but yeah, you're the expert. So that was a great answer. Okay, so now we have a question by Nazima. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. She says, how did you deal with conflict, especially dealing with citizens? There's bound to be conflicting opinions. So the question, and if I'll lend my interpretation of the question, but please feel free, Nazima, to correct it in the chat. But you're wondering if there's conflict amongst participants, like they have differing needs. And so how do you decide which need to focus on, maybe? That's my interpretation of the question, but please feel free to correct it here. So yeah, I mean, it's an important thing to think about, which is when we do research, for example, we find a ton of different needs. And these needs are, different people have different sorts of needs. And so the practice of research is distilling those needs into some common themes, but also thinking about, who the persona is that is facing those problems or challenges or has those needs. Sometimes you go in with a target community in mind, right? Like where you're sort of saying, I want to help people living, who are encamped on the border between San Diego and Tijuana, and I want to figure out what their needs are, and I want to just see how we might come up with solutions for them. And if you go into a space like that and you find that lots of people have different needs, then what you do is you prioritize which of those needs you are going to be able to work on or address, or that seem more pressing or what have you. So it's less about, like, I think, conflicting needs. It's more a question of prioritizing which needs. You will find lots of different needs. That's inevitable. Yeah, hope that answers the question. Yeah, yeah, she said in the chat, you got it. So that was it. Yeah, and I find like a lot of it, just work in design is a lot of prioritizing sometimes. Like you can solve for a lot of things, but a lot of the part of the job, I guess, is also learning what's more important or how you want to solve things in what order, depending on.
Yeah, and it depends on the resources you have at hand and the constraints and just all kinds of things that lend to that decision making.
Right, yeah. Exactly. Awesome. Okay, so we can get to a question from Danielle. And Danielle says, working with large organizations, trying to improve their sustainability, we found that having an internal champion at the company was critical for success to keep the momentum going. Is there a parallel in civic work?
Absolutely. So in government, we try to find the change agents within government. Government is a legacy institution. It is, there's a lot of, in many, many ways, and there's a lot of, you'll find a lot of people in government who don't want things to change because they're used to things being a certain way or doing things in a particular way. And It's easy, right? But what you have to do is you have to find those change agents in government who want things to be different. And there are lots of people who join government because they truly care. They want to be public servants. They want to make things better. And honestly, there's no better place where you can impact things at scale for, you know, everybody, for the people who most need it than government. So trying to find those change agents and enabling those, and then having them be champions for your work is very helpful for sustainability when you're doing work with government. Also, having a top-down approach, sort of top-down support, say it's from the mayor or what have you, that can be helpful in giving you sort of you know, that credibility or like support internally, and everybody's going to move around and try to help you. The tricky thing is that with politically appointed people, they change, the administrations change. So that's what happened with Honolulu Answers, for instance. The mayor was extremely supportive. You saw him there in his flip-flops at our event. And to his credit, he was coming straight from the dragon boat races, which is a big thing in Honolulu. You know, but when the administration changed, he was a political appointee. Sometimes what can happen is the next appointees, like they don't have any impetus to keep the previous administration's, you know, achievements and sort of those kinds of things going. Again, it depends. There are lots of people who see the value in that, see that this is doing good, and you know, we should keep it going. So that's my only caveat, is like with political appointees, you have to keep that in mind. The bureaucrats that are there, even after the political appointees are gone, having their support and finding champions and change agents from within them is great.
Awesome.
Oh, and sorry, one more thing to add. And then it's really important also to have community members, obviously. Like for sustainability, the stakeholders are the end users, the community members that are most impacted. So, you know, my entire talk was pretty much about like how important it is for the community members to be involved in the process and to feel like they have ownership of it. So yeah, so there's sustainability on the government side, and then there's sustainability on the community side.
Great. Yeah, there's a variety of things you're going to have to consider for sure. We don't have a name for this question, but they say, what are your favorite tools for engaging community design? And do you have any recommended platforms or templates?
For community-driven design. And I don't know if Don Norman is here because it's his sort of thing that he's really evangelized, community-driven design. And if so, I would love for him to chime in the chat, because you know, he would have much better answers to that. I did see him signed up, but templates and tools for community-driven design, I would say, it depends, like the tools will depend on the community that you are serving. So for instance, it would, if you're serving a community that does not have Wi-Fi, or that does not have great cell reception, or yeah, I mean, then don't use a Miro board, you know, or an online sort of tool, or Zoom or anything like that. In Pakistan, for instance, a bunch of work that we do is in these rural communities where there isn't a lot of prevalence of mobile phones. And so, you know, then the solutions we come up for those communities are SMS-based solutions. But then there are other solutions that are, you know, web-based and things like that. And the tools that we employ to communicate with people also depend very much on that. In terms of processes and methods, maybe, on that front, I would say, take a look at what's called participatory action research, PAR. That's a method of doing user research that is very participatory and community driven. And I think that there's the subtle difference. What happens is a shift of power between user-centered design or human-centered design and community-driven design. In human-centered design, the power is still with the designer, and the designer is the one who's researching with the community and coming up with solutions. In community-driven design, it's the community that has the answers. They know their problems and they're fully aware of the problems, and often solutions too. Maybe sometimes they're not able to, they can only see the symptoms, they can't see the root causes of things, or they don't have the resources to be able to treat the entire system because they just don't have that kind of resource and connection. And so our role as designers is as facilitators and making sure, but the power lies, we empower the community members and we just sort of facilitate those solutions actually happening. And I see Dawn writing something here. Dawn, I think what you sent is to hosts and panelists. If you'd like to change it to everyone, you can share it with the whole group. But I think the point that Dawn is saying here, Dawn Norman, is that the community has to do the prioritization, not the designers. Designers are mentors and facilitators. So yeah. But check out participatory action research, especially like when it comes to user research for that. I think that that has some good methodology there.
Awesome. And it's great to have Dawn Norman chime in. So
thank you, Dawn.
Great. Okay. We'll do, let me see. Well, I think we have time for maybe two more questions. So I'll do one. So David Lee sends this question and he says, technology in general is friendly and more accessible and appealing to younger citizens, younger in quotes. Do you feel like that government and technology is a good solution for aging citizens?
Yeah, so government and technology is a good solution for aging citizens. So again, I'll say that it's not about the technology. It's about whatever solution, and you know, the term civic technology, even though it has the term technology in it, is a bit of a misnomer because as I described it, it's about the process. It's about the human-centered and community-driven design process. I think we tend to come, like designers, you know, that follow design thinking and technologists. And so we have made it about civic technology, but I don't think that's what it's about. It's about the process and about leading with people. And so the solutions should be the solutions that meet the needs of aging citizens. And if it's not technology that meets that need, then that should not be the solution.
Okay. And we'll do one more. Let me see out of the. Okay, let's I think Norman, or let's go with Jasmine's question. So she says, you pointed out every 4-year governments, they change in priorities and change and design projects are multi-year and multi-decade projects. So in your opinion, is there a smart solution to this? Not a small problem. Sorry, I'm having trouble reading this. Let me read that again. So as you pointed out, every 4-year governments change, and so priorities change, and design projects are multi-year, and multi-decade. So in your opinion, is a smart solution to this not a small problem? I don't know if that makes sense.
I'm not sure I got the last part, but I would say that the designs, for the first part, I would say that the design solutions to something should not be multi-year projects. So the whole point of this design thinking methodology and the agile methodology, if you are a technologist, is that you start out with, you know, whatever you do needs finding, you understand the needs, you come up with you prototype something, right? Like you create you have a hypothesis and then you create a prototype to test that hypothesis. And that's all you're doing is you're leanly sort of testing that hypothesis. And if it makes sense, if your hypothesis checks out and it truly is, you know, applicable to people, the people that you're trying to serve, then you iteratively build on it. And you do and that's the notion of a minimum viable product. And then you do the next step of that and the next step of that. But at every stage, the solution should be able to stand on its own. It's not an incomplete solution at any stage. It serves this need, and then it starts to serve this need and this need and this need, and it expands. But at every stage, it's actually a fully viable solution that can, if agile is done properly, and if you know, this kind of, it's also known as the lean startup methodology or design thinking or what have you, is done the right way. So a multi-year project, a design proposal, that's sort of this thing we're going to do in 10 years. The reason why that's likely going to fail is because we don't know the outcome of this next thing. We're going to test it. It might fail, it might succeed. And during the course of creating it, we will discover new needs and new information that we didn't even know about. And so then we'll adjust our solution. And it ends up that, you know, by the time we do this, we'll end up somewhere over here. And if you'd created a 10-year plan that was headed in that direction, this is not going to work, right? And so the whole idea of this is you don't create 10-year plans, and you actually just do the next thing, and you prototype and test it, and you keep iterating and building from there. And it's hard, you know, I have to say, it's very, very hard. Imagine, I used to work at a digital agency, which was really focused on this kind of human-centered design and needs finding methodology. And it's a digital agency in San Francisco that works with social impact clients. It's called Sdxd. And government was also, like, we created the housing application system for the city of San Francisco, and it's all open source. But, you know, telling government, when government comes to you and says, we want this solution, we want this housing application system that's going to have these requirements, and it's going to, you know, do all of these 100 things. And you're sort of like, no, actually, we can't promise you that. What we can promise you is you tell us what the problem is you're trying to solve, or who to talk to, rather, you know, you're trying to serve people that are experiencing homelessness. We'll go talk to them. We will figure out and iterate and sort of create a minimum viable product, and then iterate from there and use this very iterative testing and learning process. And what we can guarantee you is that, so we can't tell you what solution we're going to create because we don't know, but we can guarantee you that the solution that we make will be the best solution to the needs that you're trying to address at the outset. And that's a leap of faith for government. You know, this is a huge change. Like, no, we want this solution with all of these requirements. And that was the hardest part for us to sell, because what we're selling is the process. We're not selling a solution. And yeah, and I, you know, to that question, like that 10-year plan, like that's how government is used to functioning. And so we have to change that norm. We have to change the culture of government. We already do this in a lot of like technology companies and things like that. We already do it this way. So we have to bring that kind of way of thinking and technical skills and design skills to government.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that's definitely, I feel your talk kind of showcased that with like the prototyping of the sidewalks and just how quickly that can be done, and you can see a result right away, and real people are experiencing that. So it's not this process that takes like 5 years, and then at the end of the 5 years, maybe somebody uses it or somebody doesn't use it. So it's like an immediate result. But yeah, you're right. It's about trying to sell that process, and design is also a lot of that, because depending on the company you're at or where you're trying to apply design, there's different levels of familiarity with it. So it's definitely a challenge. But I feel like with this talk, everyone hopefully is inspired to carry on that mission, and maybe go and be on a sidewalk and experiment with your own sidewalk, which I think is happening next week. So if you want to attend that, that's happening. And I think that's a good point to stop it at, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, I so appreciate all the questions and the engagement, and thank you everybody for hanging in there. We went over time as well. And please do reach out at any point. Like, I think that there's nothing better that designers can do than use our skills and these really great skills and ways of thinking that we have to address the biggest problems that we have, right? And serve the needs of our communities. So thank you all.
Thanks. That's couldn't have said better. So thanks again, Shiva. That was an amazing talk. Thanks to San Diego Design Week for letting us, for making us a part of this. Thanks to MetaLab, and thanks for everyone for attending. And enjoy the rest of San Diego Design Week. And hope to see you at the next event or in the near future, maybe at a sidewalk. So thanks everyone. And oh yeah, we have our optional networking. So I'll put a link in the chat, and there's no, this is going to be a separate Zoom because this is a webinar and people can't talk. So put that and we'll just jump to that, and whoever shows up, we can continue the conversation for a couple more minutes. But thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you, everyone.